What is up, guys? Mcdoubles back again with a brand new video. Today we're going to be checking out every new random enchant in League 3. I'm going to give a little bit of my 2 cents on each one as well, and give you guys an idea of how I've built them, because I've tried every build so far, and perhaps more importantly, where I think they stand. Are they viable, basically? So I hope you guys enjoy the video. Let's jump right in. Okay, so this is going to be a tier list slash going over all of the new legendary enchants video for Project Ascension League 3, so I can knock out 2 birds with 1 stone. What I want to do for you guys is I'm going to go on my journey from the very first enchant in the spell book to the very last one of all of the new ones that just came out. I'm going to explain them, and then I'm going to give my tier rating for them. Freeform, just my actual thoughts in the moment based on what I've experienced up until that point and the testing we do together. And at the end of the video, I'm going to reanalyze everything that I said, and we're going to come up with the final tier list after going over all of the different legendary enchants again and really getting a better idea of where everything stands in relation to each other. So if you want to skip to something, I have timestamps in the description below, but I hope you guys enjoy. So let's just get into it. Okay, guys, so I believe I've currently collected every single of the new legendary enchants, and I've tested them. I've tried to make them work, of course. Now, I've done a quick search right here. I'm trying to make sure I'm not missing anything. I don't think I have. Let me know in the comment section below if you think I missed something, and please tell me what it is. But I think I have found them all. Every single brand new legendary enchant. There are plenty that maybe you haven't played that have already been in the game, and that's a whole different thing, but I'm only going to be going over the brand new ones. Okay, so first and foremost, Spell Shredder. Frostbolt grants you elemental overpower frost. Fireball grants you the same thing but fire, and Lightning Bolt grants you the same thing but nature. Overpower consumes these buffs and grants you another buff called Spell Shredder for a really long time, 24 seconds. I like that. Spell Shredder increases your bonus spell damage by 10% of your attack power, but you can have 3 of these on you at the same time because you can have each of the different elements. That's 30% of your attack power going towards your SP, which is pretty good. You also have Mortal Strike, dealing additional elemental damage for every Spell Shredder active, and Rend is going to apply a brand new thing called Elemental Rend for every Spell Shredder active, dealing that element's damage over time and increasing that skull's damage you deal to the target by 10%. You can have each element's Elemental Rend active on the same targets. This is essentially what we call a Rend OP build, and it's called Rend OP because it utilizes Overpower and Rend and the Taste for Blood talent. Now, the requirements for this build is that you have to go into a skill called Maelstrom Weapon in the Enhancement Shaman talent tree, which is going to give you a chance on auto attack to basically build up stacks of Maelstrom that originally, in original WoW, right, would only give you up to an instant cast Lightning Bolt or Chain Lightning, but in Ascension will also now include Fireball and Frostbolt, all of which are currently using for this build. So I want to show you guys how this works on the dummy. So what you're going to do is you're going to go in there and you're going to rend in some form or fashion. After you rend, you're going to want to overpower, and you're going to be building these Maelstrom weapon stacks. Now, I finally got to 5. I'm going to fireball and do the same thing with the overpower, and you'll now see Elemental Shredder fire. 10% of my AP going towards my spell damage. Now, if I take this buff away, it only went down by 15. But if I had, let's say, 1,000 attack power, then I would get 10% of that, which is plus about 100 bonus damage. It could potentially be quite good. But the setup, once again, is the Rend. And you have to go for the Maelstrom proc, which could take a second. This time, let's try Frostbolt. Then you want to go for the Overpower, and then you get the Elemental Shredder Frost buff. Now, you can Rend again, and then this will apply Elemental Rend, and this is going to do more damage over time, and this is actually quite solid. And then, of course, Mortal Strike will do extra damage based on all of that. Now, you can keep stacking this stuff and going for the Overpowers, then going for the Rend. And notice how my Rend applies both, because I had both buffs up. And this is actually quite interesting. There's a lot of dot damage, and it's a very fascinating build that relies entirely on the Maelstrom procs. The only thing I'm noticing about this build that's a little weird is that because it's Rend OP, you typically want to use a 2-handed weapon, and Maelstrom Weapon almost kind of implies that you would want to dual wield so that you can get the procs more often. So to counter this out, I recommend you go with Single-Minded Fury, which already has Rend OP synergy because it works with the Overpower and the MS, and then pick up the Storm Strike, which boosts nature damage, and get Improved Storm Strike, which boosts fire and frost damage for some crazy synergy, but a massive rotation. Now, DPS notwithstanding, because theory crafting is still going, I'm going to go ahead and give this build in terms of design and in terms of playability from my experience so far, a solid A tier. All right, the next one, Cauterizing Flames, which we've actually done a video on, so I'm going to make this very brief. This is a fire healer, and it is certainly not good right now. A lot of people, however, are using the DPS aspect of it to do some crazy stuff with Fireball, but because that's completely 100% against the theme, which aims to use things like Prayer of Mending to create something called Flames of the Prostate, and I know you guys made jokes about that, I'm just going to go with it, to deal fire damage and stuff like that, and Holy Fire, which is proccing a Holy Nova-esque effect, I feel like that's the point of the build. Does it do the fire healing part of it good? Does it do it well? Does it do it thematically? I'm going to go with no, and Kaladin, one of the devs, has already told me that this is on the chopping block to be reworked. So I'm going to give this a solid D tier. D tier being Garbo. Alright, next up, Midnight Flames. Corruption, Conflagrate, and immolates periodic damage, increases your spell crit against the targets with Fireball and Fire Blast by 1%, and increases the damage your Pyroblast does to it by 10%, stacking up to 5 times. Pyroblast consumes all the stacks, and damage dealt with Fireball, Fire Blast, and Pyroblast increase the damage of your Conflagrate by 10%. This effect also stacks up to 5 times. So the Midnight Flames enchant essentially wants you to cast and keep up all of your different dots from what I can tell. This is Immolate, this is Corruption, this is getting off the Conflagrate, because that's also going to end up building up your Shadow Kindling buff, and then you spam a Fireball. You go for those Fire Blasts, and you hope you get enough crits so that you can utilize the very, very notorious Hot Streak talent to get some instant cast Pyro Blasts, which will then consume your stacks to do a big amount of damage. And then you want to go ahead and spend all of your stacks acquired from using Fireball, Fire Blast, and Pyro Blast to then do a massive Conflagrate. It won't be quite as big as some other builds' Conflagrates, but it's going to be solid at 50% more damage. And so you're just going back and forth, applying the dots, going for the rotation that, you know, focuses on casted abilities and Pyro, and then going back and refreshing the dots, and then making sure that when you have high stacks, you actually end up going for the big damage with the Pyro and the Conflag. I'm sure you could also combine this with a variety of different Immolate talents that people are using for other Immolate Conflag builds, like Fire and Brimstone or Pyrolate, to make the Conflags even bigger. Now, I have not seen this build used very often, but I think this build has a lot of potential because I think it's a fairly simple rotation. The problem, of course, is that you don't have any way to automatically upkeep any of your dots from what I can tell, so you do have a lot of things that you have to be worrying about and clicking on, but it's only 6 abilities. Now, my only gripe is going to be that they kind of go the same theme with a lot of these enchants. This one looks a lot like a lot of the other ones we're going to look at, and I'd like to see a little bit more variety. I'm going to go ahead and say this one is going to be A tier. Okay, so the next enchant is Fire Watch. Explosive Shot is transformed into Explosive Charge. While active, this toggled ability causes Lava Lash to leave behind an explosive charge on your target, detonating after 3 seconds and dealing fire damage to the target and nearby enemies. Dealing damage with Flame Tongue Weapon, so Fire Hybrid, reduces the active cooldown of Immolation and Explosive Trap by 2 seconds. So this is a combination of Enhancement Shaman and Survival Hunter. Your Storm Strike now increases the damage of your Immolation and Explosive Trap by 20%, stacking up to 5 times, and dealing damage with any of your traps causes your next Mongoose Bite, Raptor Strike, or counterattack to deal additional fire damage with a maximum of 3 charges. So this build is one that I think has a lot of potential, and I actually think it's going to end up being pretty good, but like a lot of the new ones, it's not something I'm really seeing as often. This build is going to focus on, again, Storm Strike, Lava Lash, Mongoose Bite, counterattack, Immolation Trap, Explosive Trap, and the Raptor Strike basically bound with a macro to all of your other abilities. Now, from what I can tell, the way you want to play this is to stack fire damage as much as you can. Like most fire builds, you definitely want firepower, but because you're going to be going into the shaman tree and you're already going to have all the synergies, things like enhanced weapon mastery, things like going agi with mental dexterity, as well as mental quickness, full hybrid mode, right? Spirit weapons to get more damage on your offhand with the Flame Tongue Weapon and more Lava Lash damage in general, Flame Tongue Weapon damage in general, and things like dual wield spec for more fire damage in general as well, that synergizes with you being a dual wielder, which I suggest you do, will ultimately pin you down as a very fire hybrid-esque build, where essentially what you want to do is keep your Immolation Trap up at absolutely all times. Then you just spam literally all of your other abilities. Counterattack should be proccing off the Mongoose Bite via a talent in the Survival Hunter tree called Killer Instinct, and you'll be using that as well. And what you want to do is lower the cooldown of your traps by utilizing the Flame Tongue Weapon on both of your weapons. And as you auto attack, you'll see that your traps cooldowns, and as you use abilities, you'll see your traps cooldowns are going to be going down. Now, with all your talents put in properly and and there's plenty of solid builds for this on the Hero Architect. What's going to happen is Explosive Trap will come off cooldown before Immolation Trap actually leaves your target, meaning you can keep both dots up on the target at the same time for pretty pivotal DPS. Now, this is not even to mention the whole point of the build being this ability right here known as Explosive Charges. Explosive Charges requires you to take Explosive Shot, and it changes the ability. You cannot use Explosive Shot and Explosive Charges. This is something a lot of people thought was going to be, doable, and it was not, and the reason they were thinking it was going to be doable is because it just happens to synergize perfectly with an older epic enchant called Charged Up. You can see I own it because I obviously did try it. Mongoose Bite and Counterattack refresh the duration of Explosive Shot. This is not viable. If you're using one, you can't use the other, so you're going to put on your Explosive Charge buff. Lava Lash will leave an explosive charge on enemies. I'll show it to you guys right here. It's pretty solid, but it is just passive damage, right? So you can see it, and it blows up. And look, even with no gear, that was actually big. I'm going to go ahead and give this build a solid S tier, at least in a universe where you can actually attack your target. If there's high mobility, it might be A. I'm going to make a bold claim. I've got to do it. I can't be a wuss on every enchant, right? I'm going to go with S tier. I really do think if you build this right, Firewatch is going to be pretty strong. Okay, next in line, Dark Surgeon. This has been buffed. I've already done a video on it, so I'm not going to go over it too much, just like all of the ones I've already done a video on. But this is a combination of Rogue and Holy Priest, and it is a healer and a melee healer at that. What they've done to change it recently is that they made it to where now damaging Rogue finishers have a 100% chance if used on 5 combo points to give you a buff that reduces the mana cost of Greater Heal by 15%. Greater Heal consumes all stacks to reduce the cast time by up to 100% and deal 45% increased healing. And now Hippocratic Oath, which is going to increase your healing power by a percentage of your attack power, in this case 20%, is baseline. You used to have to build this buff, you no longer do. Otherwise, it plays very similarly with things like Circle of Healing and the Mutilate and the Eviscerates healing and the Holy Nova that you need to have. It's a very, very good build. Highly suggest it. This is S tier. All right, next up is something I have not tried yet, but I promise you I'll get to the tank builds eventually, and that is Relentless. But I have given it a little bit of a quick pass to see how it plays, and it's a pretty interesting build at that. I just don't think it's flashy, and that's what's going to keep people away from it compared to some of the newer, more flashy stuff, like going into the Arcane Mage tree and taking Mana Forged Barrier and being a spellcaster tank. But that's not to say that this is bad just because it's less flashy. It's a combination of Rogue and Protection Warrior. Hemorrhage now has a chance to trigger Sword and Board. Now, if you don't know what Sword and Board does, it's a talent in the Protection Warrior tree at the very bottom of the tree that's going to allow you to, after using Devastate, proc a free Shield Slam ability. And Shield Slam is a big portion of this build, and so I think that's going to be pretty solid. So you're going to be spamming the Devastate, using the Hemorrhage, of course, and the Devastate's applying the Sunder Armor as well, and this is what's going to go down. Shield Slam now rewards 2 combo points, okay? So you're combo point based. And Relentless Strikes, which if you don't know, once again, another Rogue talent that says your finishers have a 100% chance if used on 5 combo points to restore 25 energy and cause you to ignore 10% armor. People typically use this for the energy gain because it allows for smooth transition into multiple combos. So what does this allow you to do? It allows you to gain 100% increased armor from your shield. So you're going to not take a lot of damage with this build theoretically. In addition, 2 of your combo point spending abilities, Expose Armor and Eviscerate, will trigger an additional effect when you have a shield on. Expose Armor generates bonus threat and causes your physical abilities against the target to deal additional high threat damage, and Eviscerate triggers a second attack with your shield, dealing damage to all nearby enemies, AoE Eviscerate. So it seems like the optimal way to play is to spam Hemorrhage until you get one of your procs from Sword and Board, and that's going to be pretty easy to do, I think, because Hemorrhage is a very spammable spell. In between energy ticks, though, you can go for the Devastate as well, which also spams Sword and Board, giving you 2 abilities that are going to proc it, and I think you want to keep this up as much as you can, because what it allows you to do is then Shield Slam into your rotation, giving you more combo points, which you can then use to either Eviscerate, which you can see the AoE damage, and you can just imagine how solid that would be when you're trying to basically keep aggro. But we can also take a quick look as well at the Expose Armor effect. Let's build the combo points. Shift Q, and you can see brittle armor, vulnerable to Relentless Assault. And so every time I do damage, you can see I'm doing extra damage now, which is going to be generating bonus threat. And I think this is going to be a very solid build. I think it's very simple to play as well. I think it has all of the tools you need to be a good tank, and it's going to already be playing off of talents that were already making good tanks on the seasonal server. I'm going to give this current tank build a solid A tier. Snowblind. Okay, this is an interesting combination of basically offensive Holy Priest and Frost Mage. Blizzard. This is a big AoE. This is transformed into something called Ice Prism, an instant spell that embeds ice prisms in the target target, dealing frost damage over time and increasing your crit with holy spells by 6%. So what does that really mean? Well, this is a little disappointing in my opinion because Blizzard is transformed into a low tier dot. Okay, that's what it is, and I'll show it to you guys in a second. Holy spell criticals on targets affected by your Ice Prism shatter, dealing bonus frost damage that always critically hits, scales with Cone of Cold, and is capable of triggering Surge of Light. Surge of Light is something anybody that plays Holy builds knows about. Direct damage and healing spells that crit have a 50% chance to make your next smite instant cast and do 60% more damage, as well as costing no mana, but it cannot crit. The issue, in my honest opinion, comes from the very, very first part of the build, and that, my friends, is the Ice Prism. If you take a look at this real quick, just take a look, right? I put the Ice Prism up. It has no cooldown, 12-second duration. I get 6% more crit, which is good, but you know? And it's ticking for 182. If I had, let's say, even 1,000 bonus damage, and even now, with like basically nothing on, I've still got 338 just chilling right there. But you're gonna put this on somebody with 1,000 SP, it's gonna tick for like 270, and you're just not going to feel good. But the point is to crit. You're going to want to go into any Cone of Cold modifiers you can get from random enchants and talents, like Flash Freeze for 45% more damage. You apply the Ice Prism, and you just go in on the Smite. And then what you're going to want to do is refresh that Prism, probably with the Cone of Cold, in my opinion, because you're going to already be going into modifiers for it to begin with. You just get in melee range, pop it, and look at that. It's going to go back up, and you keep going for the Smite. That's my most basic interpretation of how I think you're supposed to play this build. In terms of theme, I don't think it's particularly flashy or interesting, and in terms of viability, I've seen nobody play it. I've tried it myself to basically no results, and I'm going to give it a very, very abysmal D tier. Tree of Wrath, we've already played this one, and it's a pretty interesting one. They haven't changed it, I believe, from my last video, and I don't actually think it's that good. Tree of Life is transformed into Tree of Wrath, which increases your nature spell power by 30% of your bonus healing. When you're in Tree of Wrath, Lightning Bolt applies a lightning rod. Only one target can be affected by the lightning rod, and when you critically heal somebody, you're going to basically shoot them with a lightning bolt. So you're going to shoot your lightning rod target with a lightning bolt whenever you crit with a healing spell. So you don't even actually cast the DPS spells from my perspective. What you do is you heal like normal, and your guy auto casts, but you have to crit. However, Chain Heal also teaches you Living Lightning, which is a combination of Chain Lightning and Chain Heal itself. It literally does both damage and healing. Living Lightning, as it describes here, heals your target, then jumps to nearby allies, splitting into a Chain Lightning, and then doing damage. The spell has an increased cooldown, critically healing with Lesser Healing Wave, and Chain Heal reduce the cooldown by 4 seconds, and I believe they did actually change this now that I think about it to where Living Lightning can reduce its own cooldown. In my opinion, you do so little damage with this that it's basically just a Resto Druid / Resto Shaman in practice, and there are better versions of that. I'm going to give this a solid C tier. White Walker, this was the main one that they teased us with, was it not? This is going to be the Frost Hybrid. Sinister Strike and Eviscerate criticals trigger an Ice Lance. Fingers of Frost is not consumed by this, and your casted Ice Lances will give you 20 energy. Eviscerate has a 100% chance on 5 combo points to trigger Fingers of Frost, which is going to allow you to get Shatter procs, which is going to crit big and be really good, theoretically, but you can only gain Fingers of Frost with Eviscerate. Slice and Dice is transformed into a brand new ability called Slice and Ice, increasing your melee crit rating by 50% of your intellect, implying you should be intellect based, right? However, it causes your SS and Eviscerate to gain additional damage scaling from spell power as well, but requires a two-handed weapon. Cone of Cold is transformed into Winds of Winter, a finishing move now that is basically just Cone of Cold that costs combo points, does more damage, and is only usable while your new Slice and Ice ability is active. In terms of playstyle, it's fairly simple, I would say, and it seems to be rather effective. It's, at least from what I've seen, a PvE build. You want to get to 5 combo points, and the first thing you're going to want to do, I don't have it on my bar, but let's put it on here now, is pop the Slice and Ice, which is the brand new version of Slice and Dice for us that's giving us an increased melee crit. That's 10% melee crit with no gear right now. I do just want to show you Winds of Winter as well. That is the brand new AoE capability with this build right here. And you can see it is basically just Cone of Cold, and that's that. But it will hit a lot harder than a regular cone because of the combo point to element, so you want to go for the 5 point. And I've seen it in some dungeons actually do respectable AoE. I'm kind of torn on this one. I kind of want to give it A tier. I also want to give it B tier. I also want to give it S tier sometimes when I really think about it. I'm gonna go with A tier and just meet myself in the middle. Okay, this is a favorite, I will say, and it's pretty interesting. It's fairly a favorite. It's called Lucifur. Now, I'm gonna make this very, very simple because I just realized while editing how far we are in the video already with so many more of these to go. So let me break this down for you. Essentially, Ferocious Bite turns into Charred Bite, which does fire damage, and we're gonna now scale off SP. Charred Bite will deal fire damage every 3 seconds over 15 seconds. Big, supposedly, and increases the damage of your Scorch by 3% per combo point. This effect stacks up to 3 times. Scorch applies a buff called Devil's Claw, which allows Claw and Shred to give you 7% of your mana so that you never essentially go and they deal fire damage as well, and give you another buff called Mark of the Beast. Now, while Mark of the Beast is active, Scorch will also generate combo points, and so the idea is that you're weaving in between cat form and Scorch spamming, and just seeing if you can maintain it, and then constantly get off those ferocious charred bites as consistently throughout your rotation as you can, and spam the pyro every single time hot streak procs off of the Scorch. Now, that sounds really cool, but in practice it's actually very difficult. So I've noticed it as going for the Scorch first, immediately going into the cat form, you start spamming the claw, you're building up the buffs. I like to just immediately get out of it, go for the Scorch after that, which by the way is giving combo points, and we just keep going back and forth. Okay, now the point though is that eventually you can keep up the stacks perfectly, so let's make that happen real quick. You can see I'm at 5 stacks of Mark of the Beast. Now what I actually wanted to do, go for the Charred Bite, leave, go for the Scorch, okay? So I can keep going for the Scorch, fishing for the Pyroblast instant procs, that's all I'm doing. I'd be going for Pyro if it procced here, switch back at 5, refresh the Charred Bite, and then of course refresh the Mark of the Beast. You can already tell this is not easy. Now, I think if you did a lot of practice on it, you can make it down packed fairly easily. I think probably what you want to do is just figure out a way to get straight to 5 stacks of Mark of the Beast ASAP, which will be made easier with different talents and abilities, things that help you get more energy quickly and stuff like that. And when you have 5 Marks of the Beast, you just want to maintain it the entire time, which will take the form of you going back and forth between Claw Spam for mana, Scorch and Pyroblast for the rest of your rotation, and then switching to cat form just to maintain Marks of the Beast and to open up on the Charred Bite. DPS wise, I was able to, in horrible gear, do like 1500, so that makes me think that you could easily go up to something pretty high if you're good at the build, but for what, right? Because it's a lot of effort. I mean, it takes a lot of practice, but I will say I think this one has some potential. I just think it has a high learning curve, and as a result of that, I'm only going to go with a very quick and resounding B tier. And I even think that's possibly a little sus, but you know what? I'm a hopeful kind of person. Okay, next up, guys, is actually going to be a really cool one as well that I have not tried yet, but I cannot wait to do, and that is Astral Bomber. This transforms Starfire into a new spell called Astral Flare, doing spell fire damage, a combination of arcane and fire. Fireball and Fire Blast can also trigger Lunar Eclipse, and that's a big deal as well, because what we're essentially going to see with this one is just a Balance Druid. I hate to say, if you've played Eclipse Balance Druid, it's the same thing, except we're replacing the Wrath in the rotation with a bunch of fire synergy, and they all share a spell type, which is going to be pretty synergistic and probably lead to big numbers as well. So during Solar Eclipse, where you would have normally spammed Wrath, Fireball and Pyroblast give you a stack of Lunar Bomber, increasing the damage of your Astral Flare by 1%, and that's, you know, depending on how many of these you can get off. So you want to use your next spell, which is going to be the Astral Flare, as your buff is about to wear off so that you can get the effect of it, but then start switching to the next Eclipse. Now to do that, you're going to cast probably a Fire Blast, and then you're going to immediately start going for the Astral Flare and start spamming that. Your Astral Flare strikes during Lunar Eclipse give you 1 stack of Solar Bomber. Solar Bomber increases your Fireball and Pyroblast by 1%, and it's the exact same concept. So let me show you this in practice from what I figured out. You're going to start off, I would assume, with Astral Flare first, then you, well, of course that would miss, like, right? You can see I have Eclipse Solar. I can start spamming the Fireball. In a different universe, I'm getting Pyroblast procs as well this entire time, and I'm stacking Lunar Bomber. Now I want to watch the buff. It's about to go away. I want to go for the Astral Flare. There we go. And then I can go for the Fire Blast, and I immediately proc the next version of this, the Lunar Eclipse. I go for Astral Flare, and I have a bunch of crit, and then I start stacking Lunar Flames. And this is really interesting, because this is your big burst phase. This makes me think this build has potential to do absolutely nutty damage. Theoretically, at the end there, you would then go for maybe the Fireball or the Fire Blast, proc your next Eclipse, and restart. Seems to play itself, seems to be big damage if it's anything like a regular Sunfire build, and I think this is going to be a really really strong build. I'm actually going to give it S tier. Okay, the next one is Disciple of the Tides. We also did a video on this one, and I think this is absolutely awesome. Chain Heal no longer consumes Riptide. That's already big. Shaman Criticals reduce the active cooldown of Penance by 1 second and give you a stack of Disciple of the Tides. This is going to increase the damage or healing of your next Penance by 5% of your healing power per stack. Stacks up to 5 times, so 25%. Penance Strikes grant you a charge of Tidal Swell. You can store 5 charges of Tidal Swell at a time. Lesser Healing Wave also teaches you a brand new spell that replaces it, as far as we're concerned, for just general use, called Tidal Shield. Tidal Shield heals your target, applies an Absorb Shield for 50% of the healing done, or 10% for a full overheal on that target, and then additional casts will increase the Absorb effect by up to 35% of your target's max health. So if you're spamming it, it's also doubling up as a shield at the same time that you're consistently making stronger. So it's really, really strong. Your single target healing, really, really powerful, and because you're already chain heal based, you can do very simple things with Wild Growth and Chain Heal and Tranquility, which we did in my video that you can check out, and you will be a crazy raid healer as well. I'm going to go ahead and just say I think this is S tier. Okay, next one is another one that we've done a video on, so same concept in terms of description. Thunder Slam. Dealing damage with Execute or Thunderclap reduces the cast time of Lightning Bolt or Chain Lightning by 100%. Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning grant you Stormblade, allowing you to cast Thunder Slam or Lightning Blade, and you can have up to 3 charges. Slam is going to be Thunder Slam, and Storm Strike will become Lightning Blade. Thunder Slam deals nature damage in a cone in front of you and requires a 2H, and Lightning Blade is basically Storm Strike and also requires a 2H. Dealing damage with either of these will reduce the remaining cooldown on Thunderclap by 3 seconds and increase your spell damage by 10% of your melee attack power, stacking up to 3 times. Very, very synergistic lightning-based, 2H-based, Thunderclap, if you build it right, based 2H build. So you want to go Thunderclap for sure, and you just want to go hard on every talent you could possibly get your hands on that increases the damage of Thunderclap, and is really good for PvP and PvE, and you can also use it for both DPS and tank. Personally, I am also going to be giving Thunder Slam S tier. Now, the next one is Beast and Blade, and this is disabled as of my recording, and that's probably because it was OP. I was trying to give it a try, and it seemed to be quite good. You essentially end up stacking everything into your pet, and your pet does the damage for you, and it combines Rogue and Beast Mastery Hunter. So it says combo point generating Rogue abilities give you a stack of Blade Beast, giving your pet 5% of your attack power and also of your agility. This increases your pet's damage as well by 10% and reduces their damage taken by 5%. Massive! And it stacks up to 5 times. Hemorrhage will then give you Blood Focus, causing you to gain 5 energy when your pet does damage with a special attack. Your damaging Rogue finisher moves, like maybe Eviscerate, have a 100% chance on 5 combo points to make your pet's next 2 special attacks deal 50% more damage, and additionally you have a 20% chance per combo point to give you something called Plan of Attack. Dispatch will consume all stacks of Plan of Attack to increase your pet's special attack damage by 80% per stack for 5 seconds. So it's all about just layering those buffs and doing crazy damage. I've seen some pretty ridiculous stuff. For example, people will go into the Druid tree and they'll take Berserk. And Berserk is horrible, you would think, until you look at some of the random enchants that exist in this game, like Groupthink, which is Berserk ability applies a Berserk buff to your pet, increasing their damage by 20%. I'm going to try to use hindsight here to tell myself that it's not going to be as good as what it once was, and I'm just going to go ahead and give it a B tier. Okay, so the next one is Hoplite, and I've logged on my other character because I'm currently trying to make this work as a PvP build right now. The problem is it's a little bit buggy with this Hoplite training buff, but they might fix it by the time this video goes live, so keep that in mind. Well, let me show you guys the enchant first and foremost. Hoplite is the shield and polearm spec that was really big and really hype, and that was my first character, first video basically for League 3. It's also the only enchant that is formatted as horrible as humanly possible, so that's great right now, right? God. Okay, you gain Hoplite training, which is a stance that removes the damage reduction and threat increase from defensive stance, but reduces your chance to dodge, block, and parry. You also cannot use taunt basically, because taunt will disable Hoplite training and get an increased cooldown of 60 seconds. Now this combines Rogue and Warrior, so it's going to take Sinister Strike and transform it into Thrust, requiring a polearm and doing bonus damage based on your AP. And Shield Slam is going to transform into Shield Strike, a finishing move that deals damage based on combo points and reduces the active cooldown of your Blood Rage by 2 seconds per combo point. While Blood Rage is active, Thrust applies a stack of Phalanx Strike. Phalanx Strike increases the damage of Thrust by 10%, reduces the energy cost by 3, stacks up to 10 times, and you also lose all of the stacks when your Blood Rage Rage expires, so there is no way to refresh the Blood Rage and just hope that you get to keep your stacks. That's not how it works. So you got to get your stacks a Phalanx Strike up as quickly as you can, at least in the versions that I'm trying. So let me show you what I've come up with. So essentially what you want to do is, in my opinion, grab the random enchants that will actually increase the duration of Blood Rage. It's very rare as far as I can see on the auction house. I don't see it up often. So what it's going to do is increase the duration of Blood Rage by 2 seconds. You can get 6 seconds on this and then go into your Fury Warrior talents to do a very similar thing with a really random talent called Unending Fury. So another 6 seconds, that's 12 total. That gives you plenty of time to stack the Phalanx Strike because you have 22 seconds on the Blood Rage, and I've also used some more random enchants and some more talents to get the cooldown down to 35 seconds, meaning it only takes 1 shield slam to potentially reduce it. The reason this matters is because I'm not, with this build at least, constantly spamming shield slam. I'm actually constantly spamming Sinister Strike and only shield slamming when I get to the point in which I need to refresh the Blood Rage because it's about to run out of duration. As soon as I start Sinister Striking, I immediately use the Blood Rage. Now I'm already at 10 stacks of Phalanx Strike, so that means 100% more damage, right? But I still have plenty of time on my Blood Rage, which the normal build doesn't get. As I'm about to run out, I Shield Strike, and you can see it's almost perfect, maybe one more enchant actually, and it will be literally perfect, and then you can immediately start your rotation again, which is not half bad. Unfortunately, getting in and out of battlegrounds and dungeons and stuff like that takes your Hoplite training buff away, and the only way to make it come back is to take the enchant off and then reapply Defensive Stance, which is the most annoying thing in the world, especially for PvP when you're spamming arenas or something like that. Also, it just doesn't seem to be crazy. Now, its defensive capability is absurd because you can use Shield Wall, for example, because you actually have a shield on and actually use Defensive Stance. It's 12 seconds of 60% damage reduction, which is overpowered in PvP, and you can use Shield Block, which a lot of people would sleep on, but you should not, because this is still a way to make your otherwise 0% block with this enchant go straight up to 20%, and that could potentially be game-breaking. The thing is, when you stack your Phalanx Strike up to 10 and then have 12 seconds straight of a 10 stack Phalanx Strike, I don't think that that's ever worse than Shield Slam. So I think you just spam, spam, spam. So you'll have 5 combo points up pretty much a lot of the time, and that could potentially make Slice and Dice find its way into the rotation, or maybe not, and maybe you just recuperate and just have it as some niche applicability in PvP. You are naturally tanky, and it's 131 just, as you can see, healing in the background. That's not too bad. Despite that, though, I don't think it's the best right now, and I'm going to give it a solid C tier, considering the bugs, the lack of, quality of life as a result of those bugs, and the fact that I don't think it's that good in PvE at all. Okay, next up is a very, very hyped one that has plenty of builds on the Hero Architect, and that is Wind Rager. This is a Titan's Grip build as far as I can see. Storm Strike is transformed into Wind Strike, costing 40 energy and dealing physical damage based on AP. Wind Strike criticals reset the cooldown of Whirlwind. Whirlwind gives a stack of Rising Winds, increasing your attack speed by 3% and the damage of Wind Strike by 2% for 10 seconds, stacking up to 10 times. Reaching full stacks of Rising Winds creates a Rampant Tornado, dealing nature damage to nearby enemies every second, and increasing your attack speed by 30% and Wind Strike damage by 20%. So let me show you how this enchant works particularly. So again, this is Wind Strike, and I could just start using it. And I'm getting the Wind Furies off. You could go with the Rock Biter as well, so you can double down on these effects. And I think you want a Whirlwind on cooldown, and you can already see the Rising Tornado. So every time I crit, so you're going to want to stack crit with Wind Strike, I'll be lowering that Whirlwind as well, that cooldown on the Whirlwind. And there's, look at that, instantly off cooldown. So that is really, really strong. And this build, by the way, just so you know, is something that can do like 14,000 DPS AoE. It's not, I heard at least, the best single target damage, but I think it has its Mythic Plus niche. I think it's actually pretty solid. And with that being said, I'm going to give Wind Rager a solid S tier. Okay, the next one is another big one that a lot of people want me to try, and that, my friends, is Arcane Gunslinger. So this is a really interesting ranged build, and ranged builds are very good right now, and this is partly why. Aim Shot is transformed into Arcane Bullet, dealing massive arcane damage but having an increased cooldown. Arcane Missiles reduces the active cooldown of Arcane Bullet by 3 seconds. Missile Barrage allows you to weave shot and spell, firing a barrage of lesser arcane shots with every arcane missile. Arcane Shot increases the damage your target takes from Arcane Barrage by 10% and Arcane Bullet by 50%, stacking up to 5 times. First of all, you need Missile Barrage, which is the thing that's proccing a super fast and super powerful arcane missiles off your other spells. And then what you're going to want to do, proc the Missile Barrage, and then watch the Missile Barrage proc. Look at the arcane shots. That is pretty sick. Now, one thing I've learned, I'm not too sure if this is good in PvE, but I do know it's good in PvP, and so that's a big deal as well. As a result, and with current knowledge, I'm actually going to boost it up and give it an S tier rating. That gives us 7 S tiers, 4 A tiers, 2B, 2C, 2D. We have, it seems, 6 more to go though, so let's continue. The next one is the one we just did a video on, Elemental Destruction, so I highly suggest you watch that because it's a very complex one to play. Lightning Bolt becomes Energy Bolt and generates combo points. Immolate becomes a combo point spender called Elemental Immolation and does increased damage based on the combo points, and it can also be consumed by Conflagrate. Flame Shock and Elemental Immolation will now increase your active Immolate's damage by 10% up to 100%, and then if you cast Elemental Immolation once again, it will reset all of these stacks. You can see that the way that I built this was actually to essentially Pyroblast it up, then Sunfire it up, and then Immolate into a massive conflag after we get 10 stacks. That's the whole rotation. That's all you do the entire time. Stack everything, apply all your dots, then go for the Immolate, then go for the conflag so that everything's as strong as humanly possible. It's a very difficult build to pick up in the beginning. It's not always easy just to make the rotation happen if there's a lot of movement or something like that. It still has very good single target DPS and respectable, good enough for mythics, I think at least, AoE DPS. I'll take first place DPS on this boss. This one is not perfect though, and it's a lot. It's convoluted, so I'm gonna actually give it an A tier. Okay guys, the next one is Blood Venom, another melee build that combines Fury Warrior and Assassination Rogue. Bloodthirst applies Blood Venom, dealing nature damage over time and increasing the damage taken from rogue poisons by 30%, stacking up to 3 times for 90% more rogue poison damage. Dealing damage with Rend, Garrote, Rupture, any bleed, right? Applies a stack of internal bleeding, increasing the damage of hemorrhage by 5%, stacking up to 20 times, so 100% more damage. Is not a bear or cat form ability though. This is not that at all. So I've got everything you need. I'm on my other character with Rupture, Garrote, Bloodthirst, Hemorrhage, and Rend. I picked up things like Trauma. Rend benefits from haste, and I get 30% more bleed damage on melee crit. Perhaps the improved Rend is too weak, but we're trying that as well for more bleed damage and more crit. You can also go all the way over to the Subtlety Rogue tree for Serrated Blades. Not only does this ignore 9% armor, but it increases the damage of Rupture by 30% and gives you a 10% chance to proc Garrote outside of stealth. And so the idea is to keep up all 3 bleeds. All 3 of these bleeds then give you way more Bloodthirst damage, and then you have all the bleeds and all the poisons ticking away, assuming that you're picking up the deadly poison on top of it. And I want to show you basically how this works. So I opted for a dagger version with this test playthrough to show you guys. 10% more crit seems to be quite good with this build with the daggers. Focus attacks for more energy, vitality, very bare bones, not fully fleshed out, but I want to show you how it doesn't really seem to matter as much. So I'm going to start off by, you could probably build the Rage first and go for the Bloodthirst, but with this version right now, it came out a little bit later. I'm going to go ahead and go for the Rupture. We should have had the Rend up to begin with, and we're going to go for the instant proc already Garrote. Now you can see all of these different bleeds on my target. Okay, and it is intense. I'm stacking up the deadly poison, and with the right talents, if you go into all of the talents that are increasing bleed damage, this will proc faster and do even more damage, right? Keep spamming, go for the Bloodthirst on cooldown, go for the Rupture, and then I have 20 stacks of internal bleeding. 20 stacks of internal bleeding is at the moment, with a very low AP, only giving me, let's see, it looks to be like 350 damage, but maybe you can boost that up to 600 with more AP. The problem with this build is that it has a ridiculous amount of ramp up time, guys. In PvP, you're probably never, ever making this work. It's probably going to be so weak, it's not even funny. There are just going to be builds that do more damage quickly, unfortunately. PvP needs to be rebalanced in a way in which people that have builds that go long like this can actually compete. I'm going to go ahead and give it, as you can see, a very solid B tier. Okay, next we have another really cool and very powerful enchant that you guys want me to try, and I really do think I'm going to get to this one sometime soon. Knight of the Eclipse. Sinister Strike is transformed into Eclipse Strike Strike, and Eviscerate is transformed into Solar Strike, so another Eclipse-based build, similar to Astral Bomber, but melee hybrid. Eclipse Strike is going to deal astral damage and has a 50% chance to trigger your next available Eclipse cycle. Eviscerate is transformed into Solar Strike, a brand new ability that deals astral damage and has a 20% chance per combo point to apply a brand new dot called Solar Burn. Solar Burn deals periodic astral damage and scales with Moonfire. Now, while Solar Eclipse is active, Eclipse Strike empowers your Wrath, reducing its cast time by 50%, increasing its damage by 60%, and 9% of your attack power, stacking up to 2 times. Now, when the other Eclipse, Lunar Eclipse, is active, your Eclipse Strike empowers your next Starfire, reducing its cast time by 50% and increasing its damage by 60%. So the same concept, but with a bigger ability, and then another 9% of your attack power, stacking up to 2 times. So you can see the icons are really, really good for this. Like, I love Solar Strike, I love Eclipse Strike, and then of course we go to the Druid tree, and you get Wrath, you have your Moonfire, you have your Starfire, you have to make sure you have Eclipse. So the way I believe this works is we can start off with a Starfire right off the bat that procs the very first Eclipse that we need, and then we start spamming Sinister Strike. When we get to 5 combo points, we can use the brand new dot ability, and you can see it right there. And then we have a 2 stack, and we go for the Wrath, and then our next Sinister Strike gives us a Lunar Eclipse, and that starts the brand new motion. Right now we have 2 stacks. We go for, well, we missed, of course, but we had the instant cast Starfire, and let's do that one more time right there. And then we go for, let's say, the Burn, and then we go for, let's say, the Eclipse Strike again, and we're already in the next one, right? So we could start with the same pattern once again, building up the Solar Wrath to get this 2 stack for the instant Wrath, and then we go once again for the Sinister Strike. So it's very, very interesting. It basically plays itself. Once again, I said I've seen this in PvP, and it is absolutely absurdly strong, but I will certainly give it A tier. I do think it's definitely worthy of that. The next one we have is Frozen Chaos, and this is a pretty sick one as well. Frostbolt has a 35% chance, doubled on criticals, and Iceland's criticals have a 70% chance to grant you a charge of Frozen Chaos. Frozen Chaos increases the damage of your Chaos Bolt by 25%, increases the spell power scaling, and causes it to not trigger a cooldown. Casting Conflagrate grants you Splintered Chaos, causing your Chaos Bolts to hit an additional target and apply Immolate. So that is huge, right? There's an epic enchant that allows Immolate to be spread on everything with Fire Blast. This is baked in. So this is basically how the build works. You want to start off by, I guess, going for your Immolate, and you start spamming your Frostbolt, and I think you can use the Ice Lance to proc on the Fingers of Frost. I think that's something you can do. And so each proc will essentially immediately give you 2 crits. I think that's probably the best way to play. You can get your Chaos Bolt damage to go up and trigger no cooldown up here with Frozen Chaos, and then you'll cast the Chaos Bolt when that happens. You'll want an Immolate up, though, when you do that, because you'll take talents to increase the damage based on that. And you'll go 1, and you go 2, and you can see I got more stacks somehow, and I could just keep going, and you just spam the Chaos Bolts. So it looks like this is totally a Chaos Bolt spammer. That alone makes me think it could be good in PvP. And I think it's going to be pretty much good in PvE as well. And that specifically is because of the AoE with the Conflag, which I want to go ahead and try right now. But look at this. Gave me Splintered Chaos. Chaos Bolt hits an additional target and applies Immolate. So let's try that. And all of these dummies. Well, okay, not all of them. Only some of them. So very short range. And I'm going to go with A tier because I think the AoE is probably pretty good. I could be wrong on this and it's actually a B tier one. But I'm going to say it has the potential to be quite good. We're going to go with A. Frostbolt always good at PvP, and ranged is hot right now, and I think that you might be able to pull it off. Okay, the next one is Hydromancer. It transforms Frostbolt into Waterbolt, which deals frost damage and scales with Frostbolt. Casting Waterbolt applies a new buff called Conductor, reducing the cast time of Lightning Bolt or Chain Lightning, so a combination of Ellie Shaman and Frost Mage. This also increases the chance for those spells to trigger Lightning Overload by 25%, stacking to 3 times. Waterbolt applies Doused to the target. Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning will then apply Electrocute to douse targets, dealing bonus damage and incapacitating them for 2 seconds, which can only happen every 20 seconds to the same target, right? You also learn Water Nova, which does frost damage in an AoE, applies douse to everybody and grants 2 stacks of Conductor, and electrocuting an enemy in a Water Nova electrifies it, causing it to deal damage over time, nature damage specifically. So, okay, frost Nature. When I first read this, I thought this is actually going to be really good, right? Like, it has everything I want. I haven't figured it out yet, but I do want to just be bold and say that this is really good, and that even if it's not the build's fault, it's Ascension's fault, and they should buff the damage because they've perhaps undertuned it. That is my prediction with this. That's my first impression with this. Okay, so how does it play? Well, I think that you probably will just spam Water Bolt and then go to a Lightning Bolt, and then spam Water Bolt and Lightning Bolt. And I guess if you're in PvP and you want damage, it would always just be the Chain Lightning, or if you're in PvE, you can use the Chain Lightning, I guess, as well, but also specifically you can use it in conjunction with Water Nova for pretty good AoE. Otherwise, I think you just spam everything on cooldown. But here's the Water Nova into the Chain Lightning, and that's pretty good. It's instant, it's big, you know, and that's potentially good in PvP as well because it's instant and big. The problem is that this build takes a second to make its game plan happen, right? It's another one of the ramp up builds. It's not as slow as some other ramp up builds, but it is still pretty slow. But I do think it has some pretty interesting combos. I think it's actually worthy of being iterated on and played, and if it's too low in the damage department, it's something that Ascension should probably look at to buff if it did need that. And so I'm actually going to go ahead and say that Hydromancer is a pretty solid B tier. There's a lot of Frost builds actually out there, and I don't know if Hydromancer is necessarily on the same level as them, but I do think it has potential. The last one is Templar of Flame, and this is a pretty good one, so last but not least. This transforms your Seal of Righteousness into a new one called Seal of Fervor, which is a fire-based one, and it deals fire-based damage. Unleashing a seal will deal fire damage over 3 seconds, and if cast on an enemy afflicted by Flame Strike, this will now go in an 8-yard AoE around the target. While Seal of Fervor is active, your holy and fire damage spells have a chance to reduce physical damage taken by 6%, and Judgments now trigger Fire Starter Capstone, which is a Fire Mage talent that says when you use Blast Wave and Dragon's Breath, your next Flame Strike is instant cast and does 30% more damage, which again, this means Judgment now procs this, meaning every time you Judgment, you can Flame Strike. So there's two ways I've seen this built. Number one, I've seen it built as a tank, and in that iteration, I think it's extremely strong. Number two, I've seen it built as a Judgment Flame Strike spammer, which has absolutely ridiculous Wind Rager-esque AoE, but actually way worse single target. So it might just be a worse version of Wind Rager in that regard, but maybe not. Maybe you can make it work. So the thing you're definitely going to want to get is Heart of the Crusader, which allows your Judgment to hit everybody within 8 yards. This is Seal of Fervor right here. It's pretty good. We could put that on the bar, pop that real quick, and let me show you what I mean with the Judgment. So let me show you what this does real quick. I can Judgment this pack, and you can see it does fire damage to everybody. I applied a dot to my main targets, and I can even start tap targeting if I want, and I'll do extra damage in that regard as well. So let's do another one real quick. It's pretty good. You know, I really like this. You could see how this would be really fun as a tank. So I can use the Judgment, and you can see my next Flame Strike instant cast. Even better as a tank, but also incredible if you want to do some big AoE DPS as well. It's just 6% physical damage reduction in the tank department though, other than just like being fun to play. That's not necessarily crazy compared to like Bulwark, for example, I would just assume. And so really what I would say is that it's fun, but what is it really doing over other enchants, right? 6% less physical damage? It's like, I think some things do it better. And if you're, you know, only getting 6% physical damage, what are you getting if you play this as a DPS? You're getting Judgments giving you Flame Strike. But if you look at every other part of that build, you don't really need Templar of Flame to make it happen. Maybe there's a better fire enchant. I think that this is actually B tier. So upon further analysis of my tier list, at the end of this video, when I had talked everything through, retried every enchant just for the video. So that means, guys, I was going back and forth, getting the enchants, getting the orbs, putting them on stuff, trying to come up with some, you know, simple way to display it real quick before, you know, making my decision. I came to the conclusion that I was a little too lenient on quite a few, and I wasn't as consistent as I wanted to be, and this is what I came up with for raw consistency. So my whole thought process, and I lead to this. It's not too different, but I did nerf a lot of things. First of all, S tier should mean more. I think Dark Surgeon, Disciple of the Tides, Thunderslam, Wind Rager, Arcane Gunslinger, these are going to be probably the absolute best that have come out of the pack so far. A tier are things that I think are still good, playable, not quite on the same level as the S tier stuff, but still nice. Relentless, White Walker, Elemental Destruction, Astral Bomber, Knight of the Eclipse. A B tier is the stuff that it's just all too slow, clunky, literally everything takes forever to ramp up, or they have something about them that's just not powerful enough. It's just, it's like Templar of Flame comes to mind. It's good, it's playable, you could play Templar of Flame, right? But why in many ways, other than theme? And I think the theme even then could be improved. So Firewatch, Midnight Flame, Spell Shredder, Lucifer, Beast and Blade, Blood Venom, Hydromancer, Frozen Chaos, Templar of Flame. C stayed the same with Tree of Wrath and Hoplite, and D, the absolute, in my opinion, worst of the bunch, Cauterizing Flames and Snowblind, don't fit the theme or just don't feel good at all. You know, Snowblind literally gets rid of a better spell, a more cool looking and interesting spell, which is Blizzard. That's kind of crazy to me. But yeah, that's just what I think. So let me know what you guys think. This is my final tier list. Lots of time put into this one. I didn't think I was going to actually put this much time into it, to be honest with you. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy the whole overview and the tier list in general. A lot of you guys have been asking me to just go over all of the different enchants. I thought this could be a fun way to do it. It's just, again, my generic League 3 Project Ascension Legendary Enchant tier list. In case you were curious, right? He gave you a quick rundown of all of them as well. And now you know, hey, maybe I shouldn't try going for a Hoplite build. Or if I want to be a really cool healer, Tree of Wrath could be neat, but maybe I should just go for like Disciple of the Tides, because it seems like that's pretty much guaranteed to be a good one to play right now. So guys, it's just something a little bit different. If you guys enjoyed the tier list video, make sure to give it a like and a subscribe. I'll be coming out with some more builds soon. I hope you guys enjoyed though. I'll see you in the next one. Mcdoubles out.